And just another quick example that we've been working in Nicaragua, and there's actually copies of a short paper that describes some of the work being done with the Mayangna in Nicaragua. This is a project we've been working on over a period of 4, almost 5 years now, but it's coming to fruition. The Mayangna are interesting because they're in an interesting situation. They're in a biosphere reserve. Their traditional lands are the core zone of the biosphere reserve, but through the Awastingni decision, those territories have now been recognized as indigenous territories. They have self-management responsibilities for the majority of their lands, and those lands that are outside of the traditional use areas are co-managed with the state. So in some ways they're in a unique position in terms of having access to resources guaranteed, big responsibility in terms of self-management of those resources, and an interesting dynamic where, in fact, the indigenous territories have resisted the deforestation, the loss of forest in fact, the largest contiguous area of tropical rainforest in Central America that remains is in that border zone between Nicaragua and Honduras, between the Bosphorus Biosphere Reserve that comes up against the border with Honduras. And that area between the Mayangna, who are on the Nicaraguan side, and the Mayangna on the Honduras side, has been protected actively by the communities there by designating the edges of their territories and patrolling them regularly. And there's been studies using aerial photography that show the advance of the agricultural frontier, just decimating the tropical forest, moving on into the area of the Biosphere Reserve, coming up against what is the boundary of the core zone of the Bosphorus Biosphere Reserve, not stopping, because this is, well, we can say the responsibility of the state to prevent the deforestation of the core zone of the Biosphere Reserve, but they did not have the capacity to do that. So you can see the progression of this deforestation into the core zone, but when it comes up against the boundary of the indigenous territories, it stops, at least for now. Of course, there's huge pressure. Will the communities be able to sustain the conservation of their territories against the huge pressure of this agricultural frontier, which is swept across all of Central America? But it's a very interesting community. They in particular requested that we're very concerned about the knowledge that should be documented and should be accessible through the school system for their children. And we have been working with them then in terms of, they chose to focus particularly on the aquatic environment, so knowledge of the fish and turtles, which are important sources of protein, the main source of protein, in fact, for these slash and burn agricultural communities. And we will, John mentioned about the launch of the International Year of Biodiversity that will happen at UNESCO end of January, and we're hoping that we'll be able to launch at that, as part of that event, the Mayangna language version of this collection of information, which will be about 500 pages in Mayangna, which I think is, I mean, for the Mayangna, it's like, and the Mosquito are very jealous, of course, but and they want to be involved in the project in later stages of the project. But I mean, there's the Bible in Mayangna, and there's nothing else. And here now, it will be a 500-page documentation of Mayangna knowledge in the Mayangna language. I think it will make quite an impact. So I won't go in. I think I've taken up enough time, but these are illustrations done by a young Mayangna artist that show important legends, but legends that tell stories about biodiversity, that tell stories about the two species of turtles that used to live together in the same habitat, but because the black turtle was eaten by the crocodiles, the black turtle decided it could not continue to live with the white turtle in this part, in the lower reaches of the river, and had to move up into the upper reaches of the river. So the black turtle moved up in the upper reaches of the river where they are found today, and befriended the water tiger, which is, water tiger is some kind of a, at least either it's a real species that biologists have not found yet, have not discovered, or like a mythical or very symbolic creature that is an association. So there's an association between the black turtle and the water tiger in the upper reaches of the river, and in the lower reaches of the river, the white turtle and the crocodile associate together. So it's stories about animal relationships, habitats, predator-prey. I mean, all of these things are captured in stories. So there's both the accounts that people make of what they know practically in terms of which fish are important for them, where they fish, what those fish eat, how do they school with other fishes. And then there's also from stories and legends, there's also biodiversity information that's captured and translated in that way as well. So we tried to capture in the publication these multiple sources, ways of transmitting knowledge and conveying knowledge. Well, I think I better stop because, but this is, just to mention, it's an interactive CD-ROM targeting young people, trying to use multimedia to encourage young Pacific Islanders to their enthusiasm and appreciation of the incredible knowledge that there has always been in the Pacific relating to navigation in the ocean environment. So less biodiversity in a way, but it's also something where we're trying to get it into the formal education curriculum, which is a very difficult task, in fact. And so we're devising teacher manuals. We've been working with directors of education in the Pacific, showing them the materials as they're developed and convincing them, we hope, as the years go by, to actually integrate it into the formal education curriculum. Because I think that's the real challenge. The formal education curricula are stuffed full of requirements to do, history, geography, many things that are defined by external sources and that. How do we actually get indigenous knowledge-based materials into the formal curricula and have them taught? But I'll stop there because I think it's important.
Okay.